Well, on Craft of the Draft, this week we take a look at the Saints. Obviously, a lot of their draft position is going to hinge on what happens with Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller, whether he stays or goes and what that means. But what do they target? The general consensus is midfielders and more midfielders, but high list turnover in the last 2 years for the Saints. What can we expect this year?
We'll move on to St Kilda's draft plans, and I know you'll have a bit of expertise here, Darren. So they have got, at this stage, obviously the season's yet to finish, they've got picks 5, 41 and 58, which equates to 2015 points. The one player for them to consider is Kye Fincher, who's part of their next generation academy, probably looking like a second round pickup at this stage of the season. Had quite an impressive national championships where he was able to advance his case, and yeah, he's got that athleticism, ability to take a specky, and he's quite dangerous off half back.
Yeah, can certainly win a lot of the footy, and the questions around the Saints, obviously centre, if you look at their list right now, so they've had the clean outs in the last couple of years, 21, 22 list changes over that period. So what does it look like now when you've got, say, Webster, Butler, Zach Jones, those sorts of players that would be on a thread, so to speak? So are there more that they would clear out to build that draft haul? And then obviously the $64,000 question around Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller, because obviously if he goes, he's worth at least 2 first-rounders, probably more than that at this stage. But then you look at the potential clubs that he would deal with, Port Adelaide mainly, or the Crows, don't necessarily have the draft capital, so you'd have to involve somebody else if that was going to happen, which would strengthen that draft hand. It would probably change the way that they're approaching that as well. If he were to stay and they were to maintain their position on the table going in there with pick 5, I think for the Saints, it's building out that midfield again. I mean, this year they've had a distinct lack of height.
Yes.
But you put that down to, obviously, Battle moved on last year, the injuries to Howard, the injury to King. If you look at who's coming in outside of the draft, so Tom De Koning looks a certainty, Leaker Lear probably from the Giants, and then you assume that Max King gets himself right, so that gets you 3 additional height points plus the development of Taru and Barrett potentially, who they drafted a year earlier. And I think for the Saints, clearly their attack point has got to be continuing to strengthen that midfield. So in recent years, you've had Filippo, who's been another one with injuries. Garcia looks okay. Boxall last year looks okay. But keep building that group to come in beyond Hill, Steele, McRae. So I would think, and not just midfield grunt, but midfield polish.
Yes.
So yeah, I'd be
sameness to the midfield at the moment.
Yeah, a little bit, and that's where I think somebody like, I mean, you've seen Wanganeen-Miller go in there and have an influence. When Sinclair goes in there, he has an influence. I think Mateus Filippo is a point of difference when he plays, but it's that type. I mean, Filippo's your tall midfielder with good skills. Yep. So yeah, if I was thinking draft profile for the Saints, I think that's clearly the area for them. They've got a midfield that's been modest. Yep. And look, Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller would be the answer to a lot of their problems, and he's probably the answer to that in reality. Yep. But continuing to strengthen out from that would be my view.
So would it be correct to say, or accurate in your point of view, to assume that they've got the players to get first hands on the footy off the ruck's hands, but they don't necessarily have the skill set to then make the most of the first hands on the footy? They don't have that running outside player to deliver it handsomely inside 50.
Potentially. I mean, and if you even putting the ruck into that equation, so Marshall has almost played as a follower in the old school sense, sort of late 80s, early 90s sense, rather than whenever he's played against, say, elite tap ruckmen like Gawn, Grundy, those sorts of players, he often lowers his colours, but he's then very good at influence around the ground. So St Kilda might not dominate the ruck that often, despite having a very good player in there. Whether that dynamic changes with somebody like De Koning and what it means for Marshall. But yes, I mean, McRae, I think he's on track for the most clearances he's had in a season. Jack Steele's certainly good at the coalface. Yeah. But yeah, it's about, and some of those guys have shown potential. Garcia has shown a few signs that he can not just win it, but can also burst away a little bit. But they just don't have enough of those types of players to really trouble, and look, Wanganeen-Miller has shown that. Max Hall they've thrown in there. But yeah, that's something they need to find, someone that can hurt you once they get out of the contest.
So, question. I think one player that probably wasn't mentioned there, and question without notice, but Darcy Wilson. Where do you see him at? Obviously, every player has their ups and downs. Second year blues to some degree, and we know how willing Russell Lyon was to play him last year.
Yeah, his strength clearly is his running capacity. He covers the ground better than most. Almost the best runner at the club. Whether he develops into somebody that can play on the inside, I'm not so sure. But yeah, he's a pretty good user as well. He can go forward and kick a goal. So yeah, I think it's about finding the mix between who's on the inside and who's on the outside. Yeah. But for the Saints, I mean, they always talk about best available, but for me, it's mids.
Yep, and that gives you the highest chance, like we talk about, of the Saints actually nailing that high-end draft selection.
They do. The other one is there's been a lot of talk around St Kilda targeting potentially small forwards in trade. The rumour in the last couple of days was Liam Ryan at West Coast, even though Essendon are in front in that. Jesse Motlop's name came up a few times. When you look at the fact they've drafted Collard and extended him, Butler future would obviously be up in the air a little bit. So I just wonder whether there would be some small inkling of the Saints sniffing around at another small forward prospect to go forward. Yeah.
Well, I guess, that pick 5 that we talk about is clearly going to be the one where you're going to get that top-end player from at this point, unless they did use it in a trade, which is looking unlikely. It pushes back to about a pick 8, you'd think, with the bids on Annabelle, Hewland and Patterson, rather, that will likely come before that. Willem Dersma's clearly the perfect player that you'd want, but he's probably not going to be available and still on the board. Then there's some others. The one that I'd like to just put on the radar as a possibility that would be ideal for the Saints would be Sam Cumming from South Australia, the under-18s All-Australian. He's a midfield forward who's got the capacity to be really dangerous at ground level. Tough matchup up forward because he's a good mark too. But then, when he goes into the midfield, he's got that skill, and he's probably not just your outside runner. He's got that willingness, I think, eventually down the line, once he's been in the AFL system for some time, to actually be that clearance winner as well.
The Saints have recruited a lot of South Australians over the journey with a fair degree of success. Obviously, Wanganeen Miller, Filippo, Wilkie, Sam Fisher, if you want to go back. Tom Highmore was a South Australian. Luke Dunstan was a South Australian. Obviously, some mixed success through that, but and look, the Wanganeen Miller one, does that spook them if he goes? But they have generally had a fair degree of success in that region.
Matt Laray's another one I want to throw onto the board. Another under-18s All-Australian. Played mostly as a winger this year. We're starting to see him at club level in the SANFL under-18s play inside, which is good to see. But he's certainly got that kicking efficiency and polish that you would want from a player, given what we've sort of discussed. And then Lockie Doverston as well. If you're looking for a small forward, he's probably right in that region. Maybe that's a touch high for him. But having said that, supply and demand, given how big a gap there is between him and the other small forwards, I think you could see him go quite high. So, Lockie Doverston could be one they have an eye on if it's a small forward, or otherwise those other two South Australians. Yeah,
it's fascinating. So last year, St Kilda finished the season strongly and probably went from pick 5 to 8, 9 or 9, 10 or whatever it ended up being. And
that famous Jack Higgins goal.
Yeah, and you had that batch of mids that went in the top 6 or 7. Yeah. And the Saints were just outside of that group and took Travalia and Taru. There's a decent chance, if you look at their fixture, that something similar might happen again. So 5 at the moment. Does it end up being? It could be anywhere from 4 to 7. And then, as you say, moving back further.